Hello and welcome to the Back of the Nest review show. I'm your host Mike Scott, in for Christopher Hamberlin, and in this episode we're going to look back at the 1-0 win at home against Newcastle and tackle a host of your questions as Palace stop the continued drop down the table. We'll be back after this message.
No paywall, no subscription. Back of the Nest. Fan-created podcasts, videos and articles. Free forever.
Right, so we're going to try and keep it chirpy. We've got 3 points, up to 33 points. Leaves us 9 points ahead of the drop zone, so everyone's fairly chirpy. Let's talk to the people involved today. First off, I haven't been on a pod with you for a while. How are you doing, Si Pizzy?
I'm good, thanks, mate. I'm really pleased to be back on and looking forward to talking about a win for a change. I woke up this morning actually buzzing after 3 points.
That's not because of your Butlins holiday, you were just telling me about them.
It wasn't because of that. I'm still exhausted from that, but I'm buzzing with a win. It just makes your whole weekend better, doesn't it, when you actually get 3 points?
It does. I mean, perhaps the alcohol consumed took the edge off it slightly and made me feel quite shit. But yes, otherwise, talking of which, somebody that was drinking a fair bit of the game yesterday, Chris, how are you doing?
I'm very well now, thanks, Mike. Unlike Si, I wasn't feeling bright in the morning, but then I wasn't feeling anything in the morning because I didn't see the morning. That's how things are on Sundays after games, isn't it?
Certainly is for you, yeah. And Luke, this is your first pod that isn't one of the transfer pods, so glad that your review show virginity is being taken. How are you feeling?
Feeling good, thanks, Mike. Pleasure to be here. Unlike you two, I woke up feeling bright and breezy thanks to the excellent cough I had before I went to bed.
Well, producer Mike is going to have to come in with his first bleep, so f*** you. Okay, so let's crack on with a few housekeeping issues. First of all, the Pitch app. So the people at Pitch have sorted out working with us, and basically the crux of their app is it's very cool. You look forward to the game by choosing your preferred 11, having a look what you think the score will be, sharing it round, and then having a bet on it if you so wish, although you don't have to, which is one of the beauties of the app. Usually Hambo does a look ahead, but he unfortunately isn't feeling too great at the moment. Sounds like he's doing really shit, actually. He's got double vision and a bit of food poisoning as well, so hopefully he will get better in time for next week's very important review show after the Brighton game, but at the moment he's bedbound. But I did post my team on the Pitch app and posted it on Twitter this week. We'll go through that in a minute. It's a lot of fun. Just get involved. Download it from the App Store or from the Android App Store, and as I say, it's totally free. So once a week, DR, or for some reason they call him Michael. I'm not really sure why that is. He posts a video that gets posted on there discussing Palace. So if you'd like to see his beautiful mug on there, you can see that as well. Other than that, usual social stuff: Instagram, Back of the Nest CPFC, Twitter, Back of the Nest, Facebook, just look up Back of the Nest as well. Chewy's doing a sterling job running that for us. There's quite a lot of us don't seem to be on there anymore. YouTube, again, Back of the Nest, you can see the theme. And if you'd like to email us as well, hi@backofthenest.com. Stick an email to us and you're bound to get read out because it is much rarer that we get stuff. If you'd really like to be in our good books, just give us an iTunes review. It really, really helps the show grow, which it has been recently, and that is great. One other thing, if you want to leave a WhatsApp message, people don't seem to be doing that at the moment, which is sad. If you want to leave a happy drunk message or a very sad message, just add this number to your phone, and when you've had a few drinks, just send a message. You won't have to chat to any of us, anything like that. You can just leave a voicemail. So if you're very unsociable like me, then it's perfect. So just stick 0203 575 1266 in your phone, and we will play your clips. So let's get into the lineup, and we'll discuss it via my Pitch team prediction. So Hambo had done one, and then I did one myself. I didn't know whether to go with what I wanted or what I thought that we would go with. So I went with kind of a bit of the two. Guaita in goal, obviously. a back four of Ward, Dan, Cahill and Van Arnholt, which I don't think will be anyone's first choice back four, but A, they did a great job, and B, we weren't left with a lot of people after injuries. My midfield, I wanted Kuarte, Luca, and then MacArthur in front of him, with a front three of Townsend, Zaha, and Ayew. So Hambos was quite similar, but he wanted Benteke in the team, which is fair enough because he had a great game against Everton. But let's discuss what we were thinking when the first 11 did actually come out at 2:00. Start with you, Chris.
Well, I was stood with you enjoying a pint when that team came out, and you started reading it out, and the disgust in your voice was I would say sight to behold, but it was a sound to hear. I think a lot of us were very, very disappointed that Townsend wasn't starting. But on the other hand, I think the key thing about that lineup was it was a very predictable lineup. Once you know in retrospect that Luca had an illness issue and that's why he wasn't starting, I would have expected him to play otherwise. We'll come to how that actually shaped up on the pitch, but my expectations on that was, good, we were setting up to be 0-0 at 75 minutes and chase the game as usual. So not all that happy at that exact moment.
We all know how Roy's going to set his teams up, don't we now? And he's very fond of McCarthy and MacArthur. Those two will, I think, now be guaranteed places for the rest of the season if they're fit. So it wasn't a surprise. And it's funny because Townsend didn't play much before his injury. He hasn't had the greatest of seasons, so that wasn't a surprise either. And as I said, Benteke played well, so I thought he'd be in there. So I wasn't surprised to see the team. But again, like most people, I was disappointed to have a lack of flair in the team. But it's to be what we expected, I suspect.
Well, funny enough, it did seem like we actually had some flair because of what the Newcastle gave us plenty of space. But let me ask you something, Luke. And this is a question that's come in from Rob Leonard. Thank you, Rob. Thank you to everyone that's messaged in. We can't read them all out. It's not that your questions are any less good than the ones that we've chosen. It's just that they tend to fit in with what we were going to discuss anyway. But we do read them all. We do comment and discuss them between us on WhatsApp, between ourselves, if we don't talk about them on air. But Rob Leonard has said, has Roy become tired of Andros's one-dimensional play? So what do you think about that, Luke?
Well, when he was left out, Mike, I know what you thought of it. There was a lot of Fs, a lot of blinds going on, but I love Andros Townsend. I love Andros Townsend myself. I think he's been special for Palace over the years since we signed him from Newcastle. But let's be honest, this season has not been his best season for us. I think he has been in a kind of position where he's had to track back a lot down the right. He's covered. I mean, he made Wan-Bissaka. Let's be honest, Townsend made Wan-Bissaka, and I think now he has to cover a lot for Ward. He feels he needs to cover a lot for Ward. Doesn't get forward into the attacking positions, and because he's playing on the right, he's left-footed. He tends to cut inside and try and deliver with that left foot. But a lot of the time from too deep, being honest, this season. So if you go back a couple of seasons when the second half of Roy's first season, when he was playing out of necessity, Wilf and Andros up front as a front two, and Andros kind of almost like the number 10 in that situation. Andros was a lot more effective. I think it's just his positioning on the field and the system we play affects him a lot. I wasn't surprised to see him benched, to be honest with you. And as it turned out, it looked like a bit of a good decision. So not going to say too much more.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think any decision that Roy made was totally vindicated in the performance. I mean, we can talk about how Newcastle let that happen a little bit later. But so, I mean, it's a really good point. I mean, the midfield didn't seem that negative yesterday after watching the game, but it did seem relatively defensive-minded at 2:00. Let's discuss that, and let's also ask the question about whether Luca would get his place back next week for the Brighton game if he was fit. Chewy, who helps run the website, has asked, has this season exposed Luca and on current form without his penalties, does he offer us enough to warrant being back in the side? Let's see what you think about that, Si.
I think there is no way that if Luca's fit, he's not in that team. Again, he's one of that triumvirate. I think that Roy has a lot of faith in McCarthy, MacArthur, and Luca. Does he deserve to be? I probably don't think he does actually on his form this season. He's not been the Luca of last season, whether that's been tiredness or it's been the system that's slightly changed. But I think he will definitely be in there if he's fit, but he probably doesn't deserve to be. And I think, Roy shouldn't change the team that won at the weekend, potentially. So, but I suspect he will be back. I think we all know he will be if he's fit.
I mean, that's a great point. McCarthy, for me, probably had one of, if not his best game in a Palace shirt. And you'd say he'd be very harsh to be dropped after that performance. What do you think was it about our midfield that succeeded yesterday? I mean, obviously we had 18 shots on goal and only scored one, and that's an issue. But it wasn't that the midfield didn't create plenty. So what was it that was succeeding?
No, I think it was the fact that he started higher up. So their starting positions were higher up the field. And it was the same against Norwich earlier on in the season, and I think against West Ham in the second half. They were at least 5 or 6 paces up the field in comparison to where they had been in other games. And I had the feeling the atmosphere was awesome on Saturday, and you could really feel it coming through. And I felt that had that feeling of that Norwich game back in Pardew's FA Cup run season where we had to get something out of that game. I think we really had to get something out of that game. And I think, to be honest with you, the players felt that as well, and they were all a bit further up the field.
I think the attacking intent is the absolute key here, and I mean you could see a bit of a discussion happening on the when we posted on the Back of the Nest Facebook page. We asked people if they've got any questions for us, and one of the questions came from Jeff Warren, which was, "Are we a better looking, more forward passing team without Luca?" And then on that note, Liam Talbot made quite a sarky comment, but why on earth did we choose to play quick, positive, forward-thinking football with attacking intent? It's not normal. And we won as well. Hold on a minute. So the key thing there was, as Sire said, it's positioning, but also there was a real willingness to run forward. Very, very early on, like in the first couple of minutes, Kiarte's making a run and calling for the ball. And that happened throughout the first half, and you could see that they were really up for this and really trying to take the game to opponents, which I've not seen us do in the first half of a game for a very long time. So it was a real contrast with how the side looked on paper compared to what we saw on the pitch.
Yeah, I think that's right. The starting positions helped, but it was the intent to press high up the field in the first half that got Newcastle on the back foot, and with Chiari and James MacArthur really, really pressing high up and looking to win the ball back and then create better quality chances for Wilf, Christian and Jordan Ayew. It looked, I mean, I hesitate to say this, but it looked like a sort of Palace version of Liverpool's Gegen pressing, where we really were with our front three able to get them the ball much, much higher up the field, where we know we've struggled to work it out from the back and get into those attacking positions. So I think the high pressing, high energy midfield was absolutely critical to the victory yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's also key is that Newcastle seem to come out with absolutely opposite intent. I was having a look at their heat maps on whoscored.com, which is a very useful resource for looking at this kind of thing. And some of their, I mean, you take Joe Linton. I'm not sure how you say his name. Joe Linton, however it's pronounced. He was, if you look at his heat map, the vast majority was in the central third, and almost as much in their defensive third as in our attacking third. So for whatever reason, we either pushed them back or they just totally didn't come out with the right tactics. And I do feel that is one of the bigger issues, because I think the thing that many people have discussed is that Wilf was given more space possibly than any other game I can remember this season. If we go to a quote from a question or comment from King Louis on Twitter, thank you very much, King. He wanted to discuss how this game saw Wilf get a little more room to operate, a large amount of creative play as a result. Ayew got into great spaces as well. Obviously, he probably should have scored. And he went on to say that we probably should have scored 3 or 4. But it did seem that our attacking three were given an immense amount of space. And I think that probably was because Newcastle seems to be playing about 10 yards further back than perhaps they should have done.
I think that was partly to do also with the fact that we didn't seem to have our usual game plan, which is pass to Wilf, plan A, pass to Wilf, plan B. It felt like we were attacking through all elements of the pitch. And that probably was because Newcastle starting position. But I think fundamentally it was also due to the attacking intent, as Chris said. And I think that meant that Wilf had more space because they were worried about other players other than just Wilf on this occasion, which if we can carry that form on, then bodes well for the rest of the season. But I think that was probably one of the biggest reasons for Wolf having more space.
I mean, we were pretty attacking minded against Everton as well. It just Gary Cahill had his worst game in a Palace shirt. So as Roy rightly pointed out in the post match interview, well, he said that we played similar against Sheffield United as well. I'm not sure that's true, but he pointed out that we had similar creative intent against Everton. And maybe it's a good point now to go on to the chances that we missed. I mean, I can think of a load off the top of my head. There were some that were excellently stopped. Dan's header, which sort of brought me back to a few years ago when he was the attacking threat that we knew he can be. And then the misses from Benteke, which was fairly unforgivable, and Ayew that probably held on to the ball too long and shot it slightly wide. So should we have killed the game off a little bit earlier, do you think? I mean, or are we perhaps asking too much after 2 months without getting a win? We won, and we maybe won a little bit ugly, and that's all we can really ask for against a side that we usually only end up having a 1-0 win or a 1-0 defeat against. What do you reckon to that, Luke?
Yeah, I made a note in from the first half rewatching the game. I think we had 5 chances on goal in the first half, aside from the actual PVA's actual goal. All of them, all of the real quality chances. Sorry, there was 5 chances that PVA created and 2 others. So 5 chances from PVA set pieces in the first half. Cahill missed one early on, and there was the Dan chance, Benteke chance. I think Cahill had a chance at another, and then PVA scored. There's a couple of other chances, but the impact that PVA set pieces made in that first half were absolutely unbelievable, and we should have scored. Benteke's chance, particularly, I thought was unlucky because unfortunate for him, because we'd all love him to score, and he actually played well. Fair play to him; he did play well. But we've got to put chances away. We've got to put the chances away. We should have been 2-3-0 up at half time in that game. And how many games have we been left ruined at the end where we've got a draw and we should have won, or we've lost when we should have got a draw because of the failure to put away the chances? And well, I sort of feel we got away with it on Saturday. I think we weren't any better. It was just that little bit of luck, one way or another, that got us over the mark, because we played well before and not got the point.
Yes, we certainly have. One thing I wanted to bring up was, quite annoyingly, Newcastle played some mind games before the start of the game. Obviously won the toss, didn't accept to kick the ball off. They asked to change in so that we were shooting towards the Homesdale in the first half. And perhaps that came to bite them in the arse, because I was beginning to think that we wouldn't score any. And then, we know our record at the White Horse Lane end this season has been absolutely abysmal. 1 goal or something ridiculous. So it's actually fairly good, despite me shouting the C word several times at them when they made us change ends. It might have just helped us along. And certainly, let's have a quick word about the atmosphere. I might ask you this, Si, because obviously you were watching it from afar, but I felt, because there was more on the pitch, simple as, people got involved with the chants from E-Block, and it did feel like it stretched around. There was still times when it seemed a little bit quiet. It didn't seem like the Arthur Homesdale integration is working at all, but it did feel like the atmosphere was as good as it's been for or a good 3 months. How did it feel on TV? Sorry,
it came across really, really loud. It was really as if the ground was rocking, and on 606 on Saturday night it was really weird. The first quarter of the night was a Palace fan, and he was saying how it was the best atmosphere for years at the ground, and he genuinely thought it was an excellent game.
I mean,
in terms of the
he was wrong.
I think he probably was a bit overexcited to be on 606, to be honest. But it did sound very, very good. And I had a feeling before the game, it felt like that Norwich game where I genuinely think if we hadn't got anything out of that game, I think the omens wouldn't have been very positive for us. So I think the ground felt like it was sort of buzzing from a point of view of knowing how important the game was. And the blocky looked awesome on the TV, it always does. And I think I saw you on there anyway, but which was always a pleasure. But it was a good atmosphere, I think, and probably one of the best ones this season, I would say.
Well, I guess that's what comes from being 6'5". Let me ask you, Si, because I know you're not someone to break the law. Were you watching a totally legal stream then?
I was in a venue that was showing multiple games, so I can only assume that they were showing they were legal. I mean, I can't comment on their legality. I've checked. I think I'm okay to be in the room, but I think it seemed quite reputable, so I can only assume it was. But that might be my naivety. But yeah, I'm hopeful it was, because otherwise they might be in trouble.
Yeah, I think that might be your naivety. But yeah, fair enough. And so one of you gentlemen that was there, do you think that it's a horrible cliche, but do you think that we made the 12th man yesterday, or was it just a case of reflecting what was on the pitch?
I think I spoke on this yesterday itself and said that, any good Marxist understands that, the economic base determines the cultural superstructure. And in football terms, that would be that, the performance leads to what you then hear and see in the background. That said, I think people were really up for it. I mean, the Ultras had done their Primal Scream thing in the Homestead stand just before kickoff, so they'd had an hour-long tribute to the DJ, the music producer, Andrew Weatherall. So they played an hour of his stuff, and that really got people going as well before they went down into the section to make their singing contribution in support.
Reviews, predictions, comments and rants. Send us your voice clips on WhatsApp 0203 575 1266.
The discussion point, apparently, it feels like our corners and free kicks have mostly been poor since Goodbye left, as have the song since Goodbye's song has sadly gone as well. The best Palace-related song of all time, in my opinion. And certainly it's been bad since Luca's drop in form. But both the corners and free kicks looks dangerous. That is definitely the case. So Roy said the plans were exactly the same as they have been. We repeat that every week and we walk through it on the training ground. The thing we need to understand about set plays is it depends on the quality of delivery. And that's pretty obvious, isn't it? Because you can have all the organisation and all that work, but without delivery, you're wasting your time. And you need players to get on the end of it. Now, that's slightly juxtapositioned with PVA's post-match interview on Palace TV, where they said, how often have you been practicing that? And he said, never. So I don't know what that says, but it certainly felt like, as soon as the corners came in and they looked dangerous, that down header, that kind of thing, that's exactly the kind of thing that gets the crowd rolled up. So with Luca having dropped in form, and I think we can all agree he has, A, will PVA keep them next week? I hope he does. And B, do you think that will be a massive help for us? Because we went from being one of the best teams for set pieces to one of the least prolific. And I think that's going to be a huge asset if we can carry on that for the next 11 games.
My only hope is that Roy doesn't tend to change things minus the lineup when things have worked in the game before. So you hope that potentially he'll keep PVA on the set pieces. But I can genuinely, part of me thinks Luca will just slot into everything if he's well enough. And that includes the set pieces. But we can only hope that PVA does keep them, because actually I thought he had a really good game on that front.
I think the other thing to notice is McCarthy took at least one corner That was one of the early ones where Cahill got his head to the ball, but it was saved. So, there were options there on the pitch yesterday with regard to who was actually going to be, taking those kicks. With the free kick itself, you had James MacArthur was hovering over it as well as PVA, although I think it was fairly clear that PVA was the one who was going to actually hit that. He had another one where he put a cross in as well. So I think it's absolutely clear that we've got options, and it depends where on the pitch the ball falls. Because it seemed to me that actually PVA was taking corners from the right-hand side, whereas it was on the left that it was being taken by McCarthy. I might be wrong about that, but it was definitely one side one and one the other. So, I'm quite excited about that.
That's a good spot, because it's good to know that you could have an in-swinging or an out-swinging corner come in, and not the other team not automatically know which way it's going to come in. So that is a big advantage. Reading between the lines of Hodgson's post-match interview, he did very much talk about a sort of communist way. Everyone shares. He didn't say Luca was the set piece taker. He referred to PVA as one of the set piece takers, and it didn't sound like there was any kind of hierarchy, which is surely a good thing, because if someone's out of form, or if it's the wrong side, then to have someone else to take it seems the obvious way to confuse the opposition. I just changing stuff up. I mean, I'm a huge cricket fan, and just going sometimes from round the wicket instead of over, that kind of thing, it can make a difference. And when people have been talking about staleness recently, it's just one of the easy ways of making sure that it isn't quite as stale as maybe it seemed.
Why has Luca been taking all the set pieces then for so long, even when PVA's been on the field? Because Luca hasn't taken a decent set piece, in my view, for well over 12 months. He doesn't look dangerous at all from corners or free kicks. And PVA's there. We know that he's got that quality. And if there's no hierarchy, as Roy seems to allude to, why hasn't PVA just taken the ball and said, "Yeah, Skip, can I have a go?"
Because I kind of feel like if there was to be a confrontation between Luca and PVA, it would be even more one-sided than Fury and Wilder. So, I think that's probably got something to do with it. I just don't think that's Hodgson's a traditionalist, and he probably he trains through the week to make sure that they verbatim copy what he's been trying to do. With the greatest respect, players aren't always that great at thinking on their feet, and to have stuck with a plan, that's good. And if you change the plan for it to be different places on the pitch, and corners and free kicks being different people, then it will still be the same rigid thing that he's practicing day in, day out. It'll just be involving more than one person. And we can safely say that Hodgson is sometimes slow to make changes, and it seems to me that that's just another one of those examples.
Important to note, though, that when he does make enforced changes, they often work out for the best. And, sometimes they're things that people have been calling out for ages, and other times they're things that you'd think, oh, no, I'm really not sure that's going to work. But there weren't many people who were calling for Riedewald to come in and, start games. But when he came in and covered for PVA, I personally was disappointed to see he wasn't starting on Saturday. I think manager was completely vindicated in picking PVA. But anyway, the key thing I wanted to say about this was that in Roy's interview post-match, he also confided that PVA had offered to take a penalty if such an opportunity arose. So he clearly was really up for taking any opportunities to help the team and to show what he can do for the club. And that's, again, really good to have those options there for the future, and certainly for this game as a one-off.
Yeah, he certainly doesn't shy away from putting his neck out when needed, and that's a good thing. With the gyro issue, I mean, I forget who it was, but I was having a discussion with someone on Twitter who said that they wanted to see gyro play in midfield. I think that's probably too forward thinking for Hodgson. Certainly when we've only got three midfielders, and that brings up the conversation this week about the fact that it sounds like he's going to sign a new contract. So let's just have a quick word from each of you on how you feel about that. There's no details other than he said that him and Steve have had a chat about it, and he's been given the contract, and he's going to give it to his solicitors to have a look through. So each of you, starting with Si, just a quick word, a quick sentence about what you think that means and whether you're happy with that.
I am really pleased. I'm an unreserved Roy fan. I get a lot of stick for it on Twitter, sometimes personal, like all of us do, but I'm a massive Roy fan. I think he brings us stability and mid-table mediocrity. And for a Palace fan, that's more than enough for me.
Yeah, I agree 100% with Si. I'm a massive Roy fan. Yeah, gonna get a lot of stick for that. But from outside, everyone from outside the club will tell you what a great manager Roy is. It's only from within the club we think, well, we should be kicking on. The football's not all that attractive. At home, yeah, it has been difficult to watch at times, but mid-table mediocrity, another season in the Premier League. For those of us, who spent most of our time watching Palace in other leagues, it's great.
Quite boringly, I agree with the other two, but I will just highlight I do understand the frustration sometimes with the turgidness of some of the displays that we have to watch. If you think about, when you choose to travel the length of the country to watch us lose 1-0 to Newcastle, or, a fairly abject defeat against Everton, apart from a 10-minute flurry, you can really understand that frustration and the feeling that we should be doing better than we are. Certainly in terms of the prettiness of the display. On the other hand, when I look at other clubs talking like that, especially I'll think of one example, Wet Spam. When they're talking about the West Ham way, I'm looking at it and thinking, generally, look at the league table. Now, they've tried to kick on. They've got a manager who tried to play something a bit prettier, and they're now in a pretty precarious position based on some disappointing results. So you have to be really careful what you wish for. I'm happy to see a new contract on offer to Roy, and I look forward to another season of mid-table mediocrity. That works for me.
Well, we're often accused on this show of leaning towards the status quo, being nice to Paris, being nice to Hodgson. So it's great to see that people that make that accusation are totally vindicated by all three of you agreeing with that. I think the one thing I would say is that right now we've got 33 points. We've got 3 very winnable games on paper, obviously. Brighton, you never know what's going to happen, but Watford and Bournemouth. So conceivably we could have 42 points after that. Conceivably we could have 33, but I've talked about it before. I don't think we have as strong a squad as some people make out that we do. I think we can safely say, we were discussing it yesterday, Max Meyer's not quite come up to the level that we thought he would. We've got 19, 20 outfield players on the books. So if we can improve on that in the summer, great. But at the same time, I would say perhaps one of Hodgson's absolute weaknesses is he seems to have quite a say in looking for players that don't seem like they're going to make everyone happy, come out with incredible runs, that kind of thing, because he likes the dependable, solid players, especially ones that he's worked with before. So my one comment on that would be we might end up with a bit more of that. I know you're willing to talk about this more, gents, but I think we'll push on because we could talk about that all day, and we probably talked about it before and we'll talk about it again. But what we will talk about is the winter break. Has it made a difference? Roy said, I think it helped. We used it for what it was intended for, to get family away and forget about football. Of course, we can give them a physical programme, but they're professional and they're allowed to follow it and they are all allowed it diligently. There was a bounce in everyone's step, and I thought it showed in their movements and some of the play today. Definitely agree with that. They looked sharper. Wilf looked sharper. Ayew particularly, I thought had one of his better games, one of his better games playing on the right wing, because I don't feel that that's his favourite position. I thought he got a lot out of the game, and Newcastle gave him a lot of space, and he looked very sharp. So it did feel like we benefited from it. The counter argument is that surely every other team benefited from it as well, and you'd expect there to be an open game, perhaps a 1-0 win. Didn't show that. But do you think it made a difference? Do you think we had a knackered side? You know, we've got a smaller squad than most, and did it show having 2 weeks off that we looked better?
We've looked really tired for a while. And yeah, a large part of that is because our squad is thin. We've had a lot of injuries, and also the way that Roy tends to rely on the same players rather than rotating members of the squad means that players inevitably get tired. People like James MacArthur in particular have looked very, very tired of late, and he really looked so much brighter. I also think, obviously, part of that is the setup and the fact that they'd clearly been told to chase every ball, to press high, so the setup was different. But I mean, the other thing I think I'll say about this winter break is I think they've got the balance quite right. I don't normally say much in support of the football authorities, but we didn't have a weekend without football. They had two mini breaks effectively. So one. There were 3 or 4 games over a weekend last weekend, and 3 or 4 the weekend before that. So, that managed to get the balance right for me in terms of not disrupting the program, not leaving, a huge gap in, a lot of people without souls weekends. I'm speak as one, who definitely feels the impact when there's a break properly like that. But it allowed us to refresh, and I thought we looked a lot brighter for it.
Well, let me be devil's advocate and ask you this, Si. I felt that Newcastle looked brighter in the last 15 minutes than they did in the rest of the game. So Maxim, especially across from Rose. So I mean, I know they ended up with 10 men at the end when they were pushing for it, and we'll get onto that in a minute because I can't believe that they weren't down to 10 before that. But we usually finish strongly. So devil's advocate, did we perhaps overshoot a little bit and run too hard for the first 75 minutes?
I think you're probably right, Mike. I think we probably did overshoot in the first 15, 20 minutes of the game. I think the break probably would have had a massive impact mentally. And not only that, I think it might have contributed to the fans' atmosphere as well, because I think all of us needed a bit of a break from the run of form we were on. So I think for us, probably rather than fitness, probably potentially the biggest gap, the biggest impact of the winter break was mentally. And I think that's what Roy referred to in his interview as well, about having the impact mentally on the players was probably more important than the fitness.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Mentally, and especially if he does hammer them in training all week long, as we're led to believe that he does, they probably could do with a week out. Luke, can we get on to the yellow cards for Newcastle and how dirty they were? Because they're not usually a side I associate with being the kind of people that do tactical fouls and that kind of thing. But we were discussing it at the time, and I was absolutely stunned that they managed to have 11 men until the last couple of minutes of the game. So do you feel that it worked for them? Was it something that we were just perhaps being a bit biased about, or were they genuinely really lucky to only end up with 10 men?
I think, to be honest with you, we had a couple of players on the field there that were just too good for Newcastle. I thought Wilf, he didn't have a sort of mind-blowing game that we know that Wilf can have, but he certainly had them in knots. And you've alluded to it, Mike, but my man of the match was Jordan Ayew. I thought he played the role of a kind of the player that we lack, which is that midfield playmaker, but he played it from the right hand side. He received the ball in tight areas, often dribbled past 3-4 players, and then played a nice pass. I think they just got, with the pace that we went at them, and some of the skill of our players, and the good movement, and the strength of Benteke. I thought he certainly held the ball up well. I think they got frustrated, and they were lucky to get as far as they did with 11 people on the field. But do you know what? I'm getting bored of saying this. Every single game I seem to see us playing, the referees are dreadful. Dreadful. We get no protection whatsoever, and I don't know why that should be. Even against the small clubs, we don't seem to get the protection. It's like the referees, maybe this is, every club's fans say this, but I just can't see the standard of refereeing being being right. Certainly not for us, and certainly not at Selhurst Park. So Yeah, I think it was a combination that we were a lot better than them, and also the referee again didn't give us the protection that we needed.
Well, I mean, I'm sure people won't want to go on about referees and VAR too much. I mean, I was driving back home today, a couple of hours listening to Simon Jordan go on about VAR, and it's just a never-ending debate, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. I know that our referees failed the fitness test recently for a FIFA thing, so yeah, I mean, we can go on about that for ages, but we won't bore people. Great point about Ayew being man of the match. I think he was for me. And what's interesting is I found out this week that he's on £32,500 a week, the lowest in our squad, and at £2.5 million. He's keeping Andros Townsend out, who I'm sure many other clubs would like to sign. So he has been an absolute revelation and continues to be, even in a position that perhaps we didn't buy him for. Any other comments on the game in general before we get on to a couple of stats and comments from social media, gents?
Just a very quick one on the subs. So, I mean, you were talking a bit earlier on about how we looked tired, and whether we'd actually chased the game a bit too much. We often criticise Roy for making early for not making early substitutions and for leaving it too late. And that's usually our sarcastic comment that it's so predictable that it's at 75 minutes. Well, in this case, the first sub and the last sub were on 89 minutes when Riedewald and Tosin came on for Kouyaté and for Benteke. So, he left it even later. It does speak volumes, I think, that, the team was performing well and that, he was happy with what he was seeing on the pitch. You've already said that Saint-Maximin looked really, really good, and I think that's true, and he was certainly giving us big problems, so it was good to have an additional muscle towards the end. But, it's just noteworthy that he seemed to be trolling us by doing an even later substitution than normal.
I think the Tosin sub was justified, though, because he did do an amazing sliding tackle. So he played his defensive duty, which perhaps is not something we'd associate with the man. Yes, subs were odd, and I thought it was Andros Townsend coming on as well, and I was punched in the air, realised it was Gyro, who I'm always happy to see, but I think that just underlines that both of them have the best haircuts in the side. Okay, let's get on to a couple of stats, a couple of rather depressing stats. Chris has got these together for us, very kind of him in Hambo's absence. Palace secured their first win in 8 Premier League games, and in that time had lost 3 and drawn 4. So no wonder we were all happy, because we were all getting a little bit nervous. I know realistically, especially after those 3 points, it's looking quite a world away between the bottom 3 and us. But it's about the right time in the season that we get nervous. So registered their first clean sheet in 11 league games. And the last one was the 0-0 draw against Watford, which seems an absolute age ago. Also, one of the worst games I've ever sat through. Palace, 9 shots on target, more than any other game this season. That is quite an incredible stat. The game did remind me of the Burnley game last season, where I think we had about 28 shots and they had 2. I was surprised to see that they'd actually had 8 shots, but obviously what counts as a shot must not mean that much, because I don't remember them doing much at all. And since returning to the Premier League, Van Aanholt has scored 20 goals in the competition, more than any other defender. That is an excellent stat, and he is an excellent player going forward. So let's have a quick discussion of the social media stuff that's come along that we haven't yet talked about. Stephen Barton said, in reference to Mr. Cadbury's Parrots tweet, it's not often you get tweets of tweets. As Wilf does get doubled and triple marked, are we really making anything of the tactical advantage with the space that's created? It feels like we don't. I mean, the game felt like it did to me. Do we not make enough of what Wilf does? I mean, is that's the simple point of that question?
I think historically we haven't. This game showed a way in which we could. If you actually instruct the midfielders who've got the ability to run fast, to be in a position where, having drawn 2 or 3 defenders, Wilf can then touch the ball back into the centre to someone who's running in, then absolutely that can skew the other team's defensive shape. I thought we did that quite effectively in this game, and IU. It's worth saying that there was a similar tweet, I think, from King Louis again about the fact that IU got into some great spaces and probably should have scored at least one goal. That was covered in Roy's post-match interview as well, where he said that IU was particularly distraught not to have scored at least one of those chances. But the most important thing is to just keep his morale up, because with the number of chances he was getting, he will score one sooner rather than later again, because there were some really gilt-edged moments, most of which he made himself through ridiculous runs where you wouldn't have expected him to find space, and yet somehow he did.
See, that's what I love about Jordan Ayew. I've got this vision in my head now of him crying into his pillow that he didn't score. And he's our Ghanaian prince for a reason. There was a fair few comments about what team we'd play next week against Brighton. So rather than go through all those, I think I'll pass them over to Terence and the team. So we'll just go for one more question before we wrap up and have any other business. Leslie on Twitter has said, is Friedman doing a good job? I'm 50-50. Now, I want to bring up the fact that Parish, in his interview this week, we haven't really discussed it because it's been discussed at length already by everyone on social media, but he mentioned one of the things, or the thing he most loves about Friedman, is that he doesn't pay any attention to what anyone says. I'm not sure how I feel about that. Is Friedman doing a good job? And is that something that would come up from a game like this? I'm not so sure that it's something that's immediately relevant to a 1-0 win against Newcastle. But what do you think?
So on my only other previous appearance on the transfer pod, I sort of slated our recruitment policy in quite harsh terms, and I'm not really going to go back on that. I think it's worse than 50-50 for me. I think it's 70% wrong. Too many of the players that we've brought in haven't fitted the system that the manager wants to play. The manager's now looks like he's going to sign a contract for a third season with us, and with the exception of probably of McCarthy, probably IU, have we signed players that are Roy Hodgson type players that are going to add to the system and style of football we want to play? Moya, Camarasa, these type of players are not Roy Hodgson type players. We should have been signing wingers, or certainly, why haven't we managed to sign any fullbacks as cover? I think we seem to be just a little bit behind the curve on the recruitment. I don't know if all of that is down to Doogie. I certainly liked him as a player for us, and I don't really want to criticise him, but I don't believe that our recruitment has been quite up to standard.
Just to further prove Mike's point about the people who dislike the slavish loyalty of some presenters, I'll say that some presenters on Back of the Nest, I'm now going to launch a bit of a defence here, because I think it's really important to say, that Doogie had identified the right defender to augment our options in the shape of Nathan Ferguson. He's got an injury that means that he wouldn't be in a position to play for most of the rest of the season, if not the whole rest of the season. And he's available on a free because he's out of contract at the end of the season. So why we would pay money now for someone we know has a season-ending injury who we can get on a free in the summer, I completely see. And if you haven't seen the full Steve Parish interview, then it's worth a look. There's plenty to agree or disagree with in it. As it happened, I agreed with most of it. I thought it was a pretty impressive performance, actually, considering people have been saying, where are you? Why are you not confronting the criticisms? He took all of them head on, and I thought it was an impressive performance myself.
Yeah, it's only 16 minutes long. If you haven't watched it, it's up on Palace TV, and you can watch it in a quicker time. It would take Hambo to eat a double portion of mutton rolls. So, just a bit of any other business before we finish. I want to mention the fact that the HF they collected clothes for the Night Watch charity to help homeless people in Croydon who are dealing with the freezing cold. got to give a mention to that. Incredible work. A lot of extra hassle on their own behalf. I'm sure, dealing with the club, letting them bring clothes in, that kind of thing, collecting stuff, staying out in the cold and waiting for people to bring stuff in. So really excellent. It sounds as though people are very generous as well. So good stuff, and let's hope that gets through to the right places and helps people along. We've also got to mention that Chris and Luke, I believe, are doing the sleep out at Box Parks next month. So do you want to talk a bit about that one, Ian?
Yeah, I'll come in on that. So, I mean, it's in aid of the homeless charity Evolve, which runs a number of supported living hostels in Croydon. I had the opportunity to visit them a couple of weeks ago. So, they do really good work, and they get people they take them from a really difficult position to the point where hopefully they can, move on and live independently in the future. So, it's a really fantastic charity, and, we're really delighted to have the opportunity to be supporting this. If you're interested in joining our team, all you need to do is just drop us a message. You can do that through the normal channels. We're also hosting a quiz night at the Cronks Bar on Sunday the 15th of March. It's £2 a person or £3 if you can't come but want to donate. And the prizes include donations from the Cronks Brewery. So thank you very much to them for that. You can sign up to come to the quiz night at bit.ly, so that's bit.ly/Cronks quiz. Hope to see you there. And we're really looking forward to both that quiz night and then to a rather testing night in the conditions covered. So not as bad as if you were actually homeless, but it's going to be a pretty difficult night because I imagine it's still going to be pretty damn cold.
Okay, well, look, I'll make sure that we post up on the socials about that regularly. If you want to donate, if you want to get involved, then please do. That's really excellent stuff. So, I believe that also Luke wanted to mention about Andrew Weatherall as well.
Yeah, I did. R.I.P. Legend of the music industry. I'm personally a particularly big fan of Primal Screaming. If it hadn't been for the requirement to consume fairly large quantities of beer before the game, I would have spent more time listening to the excellent DJ set put on by the Homesdale Fanatics. So big up the HF for not only their work supporting our local community and homelessness, but also for recognising a different form of culture from football and bringing that into the Homesdale.
I was actually unaware that he'd passed away. He produced my punk band's first EP. I wasn't in the band at the time, but they always had good things to say about him, and he was clearly very talented because he got a sound out of a band that at the time probably weren't that tight. So yes, rest in peace. So only one thing left to mention. That's please get yourself a copy of the Pitch app. Look up Pitch on the App Store or the Android store. Have a play with us. You can join us. You can have a debate about whether we're wrong for the starting 11, that kind of thing. And there's generally plenty of back of the nest coverage on that particular app. And as you probably know by now, it's also co-run by John Solaco. So yes, excellent. Get involved. This week, Love Sport will be back Wednesday 8 till 9. Then the preview show, Terence and the boys will be looking ahead to the show that we're always the game that we're already shitting ourselves about, Brighton away, which will all be out on Saturday afternoon, far too early. So in the meantime, thank you to my panel and thank you to producer Mikey for dealing with that. And we shall see you again next week.
I can talk to you about how I got up at 5 a.m. and ran 24 miles this morning.
No, don't do that. That's upsetting.
Honestly, it was just ridiculous. The weather. Got to listen to the Fury and Wilder fight though. That was pretty cool. Yeah. But yeah, no, it was mental. Getting up it took me 3 hours and 47 minutes of just running around, and yeah, I had to take a dump in a farmer's field, which was pretty disappointing. Stomach issues, but. don't record it. I thought we stopped.
Fantastic.
Shit, I thought we'd stop recording.
With a new deer.
This has got to go in. This has got to go in.
No, don't put it in. Don't put it in. I thought we were finished.